excited to be having a chat today with Lydia Oxley Johnson. And today we're going to think about what it means to have a career with a purpose. And so I'll leave Lydia to introduce herself to kick us off.
Hello. So I'm Lydia and Mel. I mean, you and I have known each other for years at this point, starting off when we were doing a fair trade month. And it's so funny because I feel like you really found me right in the middle of my career thus far. So I started off in brand marketing at Red Bull right in college, really learned all of the ropes from that space, moved into Imperfect when I really felt like we needed more of a mission in the food space. And I had spent a lot of time in Iowa and seen really how impactful agriculture can be when it's looked at from a space of solutions and especially consumer driven solutions. We know a little bit about our agriculture system, but we don't know a ton. And being at Imperfect not only taught me about rescued produce, but it also taught me about the food system generally. So ultimately, once I was there, I knew that I was home. And home for me is really improving the food system and building something better that works for people, for the planet, for farmers. And so there's so much there within food. And I always talk about how emotional that is as well. Now, while I was at Imperfect, I did have some purview into the launch of our merch. We did a lot of private label products, and we launched these cookies with renewable milk ingredients that were incredible. And I was so excited for them. And it was the first that I had ever really heard of an upcycled product. And I had stocked renewal mill for years. And then after spending a little bit of time in regenerative agriculture, saw an opening and jumped in to work with Caroline and Claire. And it's been history ever since. So I've been over at renewal mill for about a year now. Really came in to help scale operations. So Renewal Mill has national distribution in Whole Foods, but we're also an ingredient company. And both of those two things together can contribute to a lot of complexities that needs the structure and a lot of the CPG industry informed frameworks to truly scale. Renewal Mill is considered an upcycled brand. So what we do is we work within the manufacturing system to pull things like proteins and fibers that are processed out of things that we use every day. So a really good example of this is oat milk. If you've had oat milk before, the reason why it's kind of carby is because the protein and the fiber from the oats that's naturally occurring there is actually pulled out in the manufacturing process. So we take that's typically considered waste, and we dry and mill it into a flour. Flour has protein applications, and that's just one of our ingredients. So we really look at things a little bit differently within the food system to mine nutrition and really good taste to create novel ingredients. And that's what's in our products. It's also what's in our ingredient distribution.
Yeah, wow, that's so many things. I mean, finding that thing that you were passionate about and then being able to take this opportunity is so exciting. And I think two things that come to mind as you were talking. One of them is just thinking about how many products potentially could be made based on waste, and how much waste there is in our food system is, I think, something that a lot of people really don't think about. And I think when we think about food waste, right, one of the main concerns is that it'll just end up in landfill, and then it'll produce methane emissions, which we know are way more potent than CO2 emissions, and they cause obviously an impact deeply on our climate change environment that we're having. So thinking about ways that we can reduce the food waste that's going into landfill is really exciting. And I think, more exciting is thinking about how you kind of took this pivot to find a career that you're really passionate about, which you can definitely sense. And that would be really helpful since we're trying to make sustainability a bit more accessible. If you could give us a definition of an upcycle, I think that would be really useful.
Yeah, of course. So upcycling in essence is using a food or ingredient that otherwise would be wasted and then producing it using a more verifiable supply chain. And so what that means is that we're taking something and working within the industry to use everything of what's available within that. A really good example of some upcycled foods include tater tots. So this is kind of one of the funky things about upcycling is once it becomes a staple, we don't really consider it upcycled anymore because it's becoming its own stream. And I really consider that a win. I think as we're looking at upcycling new products, we really want to be going after nutrition. We want to be going after taste. So what is something that you would be eating and using anyway? And finding a way to find unique spots that are underutilized currently.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I definitely didn't think about that from a tater tot perspective, but I mean, it makes sense, right? We have potato byproduct and it has to go somewhere. So why not into a crispy fried goodness?
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
I love it. Well, thanks for walking us through that. I think that, the 3 R's are super commonplace, but I think upcycled is a newer term, at least for those that aren't working in it on a day-to-day basis, like we might be. And that's really helpful to hear the more technical definition for those that might be curious. Yeah, I think one thing that you spoke about that I wanted to go back to is really working in a values aligned organization. I think more and more people are really looking to find places that are aligned with their values because we spend generally 40 hours a week at work. And so, one thing that I think is super interesting is when we think about younger generations, they're super passionate about being values aligned, and whether that's being from a gendered perspective, from having different representation in the workplace, whether that be that the company is really focused on climate change and that they're taking climate action. I think that, that could really take a lot of different positions. But I think that really over 3/4 of the US population is looking for jobs that allow them to like work in a place that's aligned with their values. And I recently read a study that said 83% of people want to take action on climate change in their jobs. And so I'm curious, hearing that you're really jazzed about the values alignment, if you could talk a little bit more about like how you made sustainability in your role, even if your title isn't, sustainability manager.
For sure. I think it's a couple different things. So in the smallest sense, is the job that you're doing actionable for someone to make a true difference? That for me is really important because I love to be able to share what I'm doing and let people in my life be a part of that. Food is a really exciting thing, and I say this everywhere around town, day in and day night, of what Jeannie Foles used to say at Imperfect, and that was, we have a choice 3 times a day of the vote that we get to make in the food system. And I love how actionable that is. And so food is a really special one in that sense. So what really made me fall in love with Imperfect Foods is that we measured our impact in 3 different metrics. So we looked at pounds of food that's being saved, we looked at water savings, and emissions avoided. And to be able to wake up every day and know that that number is going up in all of those different areas was just really motivating beyond the normal KPIs or just standard ways of working and moving around within my career. The best thing about Renewal Mill as well is that we share those same impact stats. And so just last year, we saved over 670,000 pounds of food from going to waste. And all of those things percolate into the water savings and the emission savings as well. Now, impact as a metric system, like when you're kind of thinking about your standards and your go-to greatest hits of impact metrics, that's going to change over time. So a lot of what Refed is looking at right now is methane avoidance. And so you might start your career really only looking at pounds of food waste avoided, but you could end your career looking at something much deeper or something in an entirely different place, but equally important to the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So many things you said really resonated with me. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I actually have a background in sustainable food systems. Like that's what I studied in university. And I feel like it's interesting to note that, or at least I feel like I've been paying attention, more and more universities are having sustainability degrees. But like when I went to school, that wasn't a thing. And so I as well kind of had, the same perception as your old boss that we all have to eat. And if we want to create equity and inclusivity and think about sustainability and resilience, like food is a place that we have to do it because that's something that's human in nature. So I also follow Grist. I don't know if you read their articles at all, but for those that aren't familiar, they publish a lot of things on environmental justice and different kinds of, climate related topics. And they recently gave out awards for like the Grist top 50 sustainability advocates or climate advocates. Don't quote me, but something in that nature. And they spotlighted a UC Berkeley grad who actually is based in New York. And they have a program at UC Berkeley where students can propose classes. So they can, create a curriculum and then propose it to their fellow students. And she created a class called Solutions for Sustainable and Just Future, which she has since turned into a nonprofit because it had the highest sign up rate of any of these sorts of like student created classes. And all of her peers were so excited about ways that they could take like action or think about being sustainable in their degrees or in their lives, even if that's not what they were studying. And I was just like, man, that's what we need. Like, we need more people who think that like this is something that we need and we want to do. And like, how do we make that happen? So, long way to ask, if you kind of created a place where you feel like you're doing great things and you're creating impact, what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to kind of find that impact career, impact opportunity in their personal or professional lives?
Well, there's two sides of this. I think, and this is such an important question to be asking ourselves at any age and like at any time in our career. But I would say within the workplace, no matter what industry you're in, there is always going to be something that is pushing on climate or is pushing on an area where sustainability is a factor, right? So like in food, there are so many things that come up because it's so obvious of like packaging, of the way that things are grown. The meat industry is a really hot topic right now, of course, as well. And so there is a place within each part of the food industry to make a difference. And so finding that area where you know it's pushing on a sustainability problem and putting yourself in charge of that thing and making that being a squeaky wheel and being a louder voice on that is really important. And it can be as simple as like the recycling program in your building or just like the larger area that you're in and like promoting composting within the restaurant industry. And so
Absolutely.
there's something within each of that. Make yourself that person, even if you're not touching it directly. On the flip side, though, say you're in the most specific job ever professionally, and you might be the office composting queen, but maybe there's like that is kind of like your specialist, that is all you can really do. Also look at your personal life too. There's a lot of different ways to get involved. Something that we recently got to get involved in ourselves outside of the food system is florals. Florals
Yeah.
is a really interesting industry and something that I really got involved in during COVID. And it's really looking at a passion through a sustainable lens of teaching people about not using foam, teaching people how to keep flowers alive for a long time in your house, and just elevating some of the crazy things that happen in that industry. All of our supply chains are actually really connected, and the floral supply chain can teach us a lot about the avocado supply chain. And so all those things are interconnected, and florals have helped me just as much in food as food has helped me in florals and understanding something that goes bad fairly quickly. So that's another area too, is like finding your group and then finding something that you really care about and weaving sustainability into that. Not thinking about things as super black and white, but finding that weaving in that allows you to learn about something. I also see this take place a lot within the fashion industry. Fashion does a really good job of finding people that are like-minded in the second life of clothing or even pre-consumer fabrics that are oftentimes going to waste. And so you see a lot of people at the New York Sustainable Fashion Meetups that maybe work at very standard brands, and maybe they're the designer, they're like the supply manager, and so they're not necessarily touching sustainability directly within their role, but they're building their personal brand as a designer around caring about these things, or as a person within the fashion industry about caring about these things. And so those connections for an industry that pulls people all over the place, super, super important. I really recommend Fab Scrap and Reclipped. Those are really good examples of just getting involved outside of your day-to-day work. And of course, I don't work in fashion, but I'm still a stray cat at all of these things because I care about it. And so that's just a way to really meet the right people that are in this space that care about it as well. And that's really where beautiful things happen is at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that, so many things you say are so true. Any job can really be a climate or sustainability job. It doesn't have to be your title, but it's if you see, a problem, point it out. Like we don't have to be bystanders in our world. And I think that there's so many interesting opportunities and overlaps with so many supply chains because so many things are coming from such faraway places that there's an opportunity to be much more conscious consumers, think about maybe consuming a bit less. And I know a while back you shared with me you're really on a mission not to buy any new clothing, to only shop secondhand and to think about the impact there. I heard a crazy statistic that said that we have 6 generations worth of clothing on this planet. And that is a lot of clothing that we do not need. So if we can be more conscious in our purchasing habits, it can have a huge impact. But thank you for all of your optimism and the purpose that you're driving in your personal and professional life. I hope people feel a little bit more inspired to be more aware of their surroundings and think about their impact. And I hope that we can try and keep it cool and make sustainability more accessible for all. Thanks, Lydia.
Thank you. Appreciate all the work that you do as well.